It's still running. All right, so there it is. So, hi everybody. Welcome to episode 43 of Celebrating the Brand Ambassador. This week we're changing it up. We're doing a new time at 11 a.m. So I guess we are enjoying gin at a proper hour.
Breakfast martini.
But but I'm very excited for today because I have some incredible people from the Ginworld, which is I'm going to say this. I'm going to say Natasha first because Bahrami. Am I saying your last name correctly,
Yes.
Natasha? And then I'm going to do it. Mattias. No.
Yes.
Mattias.
That was beautiful.
Mattias.
I love it.
Mattias. And I'm sorry. I do this all. I'm trying to get better at making sure I pronounce people's names right. From Hendrix Gin. So I'm very excited to have both of you here today to talk about gin, as well as talk about what it's like to be a brand ambassador, as well as what it's like to deal, Natasha, on your side, sometimes with people coming in, also presenting brands to you from the bar side of the industry. So there's going to be a lot of great things, but I do want to start it off like I do all shows where I get to know a little bit about you guys get to share your backstories, because I find the most intriguing people on the show, and so many people never get to know what everybody's about. They only get to have that quick drink, say hi and whatever. And you guys both have incredible stories. So I'd love to start off with that. And then we'll continue for anybody tuning in. And then we'll get into the business side of things and talk about some best practices and share some stories. But I'm going to start it off with Mattias. I said it correctly. I'd love to hear your story. Give me a little bit about, because all I know about, you had this great British accent, you worked in Aspen, and now you're the Hendrix Gin brand ambassador. But tell us how you got there.
Yeah, so it all started when I was 2 years old. And I said,
that far.
The truth is, it's funny how sometimes in life, your passion and your career can come colliding together. And I feel lucky enough and privileged enough to have had that happen to me while I was at university in Chester, England. So I was studying psychology, and I actually decided at some point during my first year that I hated my degree. It was terrible. I could not, if I heard one more thing about Piaget's theory of development, I'm so sorry to my lecturer who taught that class. I honestly was going to quit. But one night, I had this realization that while I was bartending to put myself through, I realized I was kind of a therapist. In a way, I was this informal mental health professional. And I went back to school, and I had some incredible lecturers. And so I had Mandy Urquhart and also, Michelle Tidley, and they were incredible at inspiring me to find myself in the degree. What was it about the degree that was mirroring my interests? So I did 2 dissertations. One was called On the Rocks with a Twist on Mental Health, and the second was called Make It a Double. And it was a comprehensive analysis of stress in frontline hospitality workers. And those 2 things led me into this industry full-fledged. So I kept working in England, and when I graduated from university, I moved to Aspen, Colorado for family reasons. And then I quickly opened up a couple bars there, or helped open a couple bars there, ran a couple of the programs, and just had a really great experience in the Rocky Mountains there. And I was actually too young to enter any of the competitions in America. So
I find that so bizarre.
So strange, right? So I ended up actually kind of putting on my own. So when I came here, I put them on, and then eventually ended up meeting a wonderful amount of people from William Grant & Sons, fell in love with the brand ambassadors and the way that they worked. And when the role for Hendrix came up, which was originally the Central US ambassador, I ended up actually being asked to apply for it, and I got the job.
Incredible. And that's actually where you met Natasha, right? Because you were still too young to work for the brand. So you end up learning about gin from Natasha. Tell me a little bit about that story.
No? So we met when we did the Ginworld over in St. Louis for the first time. And that was when I was in the central role. And then from the central role, I ended up I've been in the role for 5.5 years now. And about 2 years ago, I ended up picking up the full west of the US. So now I cover everything from Nashville to Hawaii. And I had the pleasure and the privilege of attending Ginworld in St. Louis that must have been about 4 or 5 years ago, I think, Natasha.
Something like that. It's been a few years.
And it was amazing.
Very, very cool. I love it. Thank you so much. And I love the fact, and we're definitely going to talk more about the psychology and how you use that in your platform later on in the conversation. So Natasha, you are known as the Gin Girl. As she's pouring her gin martini. Love it. You own a gin bar in St. Louis. and run the Ginworld, an education symposium. So we're definitely going to have a chance to speak about all of these, but I wanted you to tell us, a little bit about your story about how you fell in love with gin, and where, what you got going on today.
I love to say that
not exactly today, but in your life.
who did not fall in love with gin, and how wonderful it is once you get to understand this beautiful spectrum that it has. But when I was falling in love with gin, it was completely it was a surprise to me as well. So as I've said many times, I fell in love with gin through a dirty martini, and I've heard that from a lot of people in the past as well.
Ooh, there's a motorcycle that went by.
I fell in love with gin after I learned that gin is something used in cocktails and such. And at that time, it was a very vodka world. And so my dirty martinis prior to that had been made with vodka. And I finally tasted one with gin, and it blew my mind that flavor profiles could be so richly different. So I dove deeply into London dry gins, which was really only a few gins were distributed in the US at that point. And I got my hands on every single one of those. And everywhere I went to, I tried to try a gin tonic or a martini. And when I mean everywhere I went, I'm talking when I was living in St. Louis, but when I moved to Spain, when I moved to New York, when I moved to Lebanon and Beirut. So like around the world, it was started seeping deeply into me that it was something I loved. It was really great because it like didn't cause me the hangovers that I was used to with other things. But also, I always felt that when I ordered a gin something, everyone around me was like, really? Gin? Why are you ordering gin? And it was exciting because I got to explain why my passion for gin. So it just kind of happened innately and just naturally. But when you're kind of obsessed with something, you read everything about it, you get your hands on everything you can. That's just where I went. I went down the rabbit hole just for personal use. I really enjoyed the spirit. And once I started learning, there was a huge range. Once really the American craft distilling movement started booming, I started realizing there was such a range of flavor profiles that I just couldn't get enough. So it was just kind of this natural passion that went there before we moved into the professional world with it.
I love that. I also wanted, because I think your background is so fascinating. I know you went to Madrid, but you also went to Lebanon. But all right, so two things that I think people probably would love to know about you. Why you moved to Lebanon to get your master's, and what you got your master's in, and the fact that you used to work in Washington, D.C., like helping create policy, is probably two things most people don't know about you if they've never had a chance to really speak to you so in depth. So share a little bit of that as well.
I'll keep it short and sweet. But why did I move to Lebanon? My master's was in international relations and foreign policy. And I wanted to expand, for one, my language skills and my ability to really deep dive in that part of the world. So I finished my master's at AUB and LAU in Beirut, but somehow it's exploding right now, but they actually have a fantastic cocktail scene there. As we've seen, some of them are on 50 Best Bars, etc. But really went there and was, again, ordering martinis and gin tonics there, which really wasn't the norm at that time there, and continue to press and push there. Came back to the US, finished my master's degree, and couldn't get a job in foreign policy in St. Louis, Missouri.
Shocker.
What? So definitely made the scary move to Washington, D.C. Ended up working at a big Middle Eastern think tank, and then worked directly for some talking heads, and was pegged to do research and wrote articles, peer-reviewed journals, but really with the focus on sanctions. And so I loved what I did. I got to prove that I could do something outside of my parents' restaurant that I grew up in. now 38 years strong, but sometimes I had to prove myself outside of what my parents had really created for me. But when I was in Washington, D.C., I just couldn't get the restaurant and bar bug out of me. It was so deeply ingrained in me. I ended up working at a law firm in IT, and still I had to convince my parents that I know I'm successful at what I do and you want me to do that, but could I still jump back into the restaurant world and the bar world? And I guess they're like, why? Do what you want. Why are you listening to anybody else? Just do what you want. And I ended up still keeping my day job, and I picked up 3 different bars and restaurants in the DC area, including the Gin Joint that was in DC, and sat at that bar, and I promised myself I wasn't going to leave until I got a job there. Talked to the owner, and my interview was telling him the intimate details of almost every gin behind his back bar. He had about 175 gins there. I could talk on maybe 40 of them, right? Because I didn't know everything at this point. Nobody knows anything. I was trying to impress him that I knew enough about the category of gin that I could be a benefit to his bar. I started working there the next day. So it was something in me that had to do this. And as I continue to push forward, I just knew that I had to come back and open a gin bar, even though everyone said no one drinks gin. So about that.
Yeah, so which we're definitely going to dive into, about how you convince people in St. Louis, the beer and whiskey joint, of drinking gin, and also how you convince people, even how you talk to people in the gin joint who might not be familiar with it, because it is a skill set to be able to lure people in. So we're going to talk about it a little bit later, because I think it's also a best practice of when you work for brands, how to talk to other people about the product you're working on and convince them that this is something worthy of having behind their bar, and how to sell it to their customers. So we're going to talk a little bit about the business side of things in a kind of a way. So I'm going to go with you, Mattias. I know you began, besides being a mixologist and a brand ambassador, as you mentioned, you have a degree in psychology, and you have focused your efforts on educating others on mental health. So I would love to hear a little bit more about why you think this is so important. I mean, I know it's an obvious, mental health is important. And then how, as a brand ambassador, you're able to kind of weave this into your platform, because obviously you're building your own personal brand. You're also building it into your platform as the brand ambassador for Hendrick's. And then the last part, we're going to talk about some best practices I think you can share to some of the industry folks as some things they can do for themselves to maintain that mental health. So it's a lot bundled into one, but
I love it. Well, let's distill it down, as I'm sure somebody in the gin world would say. I think the interesting thing about this is, like, I've progressed right from like literally the bottom of the bottom to sort of where I am now. And it's been a beautiful journey along that road. And at every point along it in the industry, I've noticed more and more how the industry can be so destructive. I've seen friends take the wrong paths. I've seen friends, unfortunately, pass away. I've seen the destructive habits that our industry can lend to, but I've also seen the beauty of it in so many ways. And I would say the beauty definitely outweighs the negativity, as long as we can make sure that we keep a balanced lifestyle. Because after all, right, in the industry, when we're making cocktails, we're searching for balance in drinks, but so often we do that so much that we forget to look for balance in ourselves. And as we go through life, we have to make sure that we're approaching it from this sort of like balanced lifestyle, right? Mm-hmm. So when I was in the UK, I noticed that stress was a big thing. But stress is necessary in our industry to actually make us work fast, to keep us working efficiently behind the bar at night. But the truth is, it's not just on us to manage stress. We have to find tools with which we can actually maximize the efficiency that we process that stress. And that responsibility lies with us. It lies with our managers. It lies with the owners of different establishments. And as a brand ambassador now, I'm lucky enough to have a voice where some people from all of these different levels will now listen. And so when I'm in these conversations going throughout the year, I'm always making sure that I'm just sharing insight from things that I've seen around the world, things that I've maybe developed myself, or that friends have told me, or that we've discussed over dinner some nights. And it's those unique interactions. It's that sharing of information that we do so well as an industry. We all absolutely love and adore these drinks that have been passed down through generations. So why can't we pass down some great habits from generations of bartenders to the next generation? And as I look through just some very simple examples of this, to your point before about kind of giving some practical takeaways, Robin Nance, Jackie Summers, and a few other people, we gave a seminar at Tales a couple of years back. I think it was even actually last year with the digital world that was going on. And it was a fantastic seminar, but in it, Robin Nance had this beautiful theory about doing a post shift. And everybody in the industry does a pre-shift, right? And we talk about what's happening that night, what we should expect, any sort of issues that might be coming up with dietary restrictions, people that might be an issue. Why would we not do a post shift after work to sort of debrief ourselves from the stress that happens during the shift? Did you have a troublesome guest who just grates on you? Do you know what I mean? Did you forget that mayonnaise or the ranch dressing on the side, and then you're thinking about it at 4 a.m? How many Manhattans did you make, and are you literally going to be dreaming about stirring them all night? It's a question that it just simply, by having a little time at the end of the shift to sort of debrief, even if it's literally just 2 minutes with your team before you start cleaning, kind of sitting down, having a glass of water or something, just saying, hey, how was your shift? Oh, God, it's really stressful, man. But I think I'm going to be okay. All right, awesome. Cheers. That was a great night. What fun. And if it was a bad night, how as a manager can you actually come in and then take that bad night and reframe it for the bartender in a way that makes them feel like they did a good job and that tomorrow's going to be better? And it's those small things that I think can be really beautiful. And then, the bigger one I will just delve on real quick is nutrition too. At the end of a shift, I find it so funny how many places waste so much food in a restaurant, when actually bartenders are then going to go home and have a slice of pizza
Sure.
or something crazy, when the restaurant could actually be putting the food to good use instead of throwing it away. So I've always encouraged people to be able to create sort of like a post-shift meal that people could take with them, or any takeaways, leftovers, things like that could be divvied up for the staff. And that way it just helps to provide a bit more of that lifestyle balance that we can so often seek but not be able to obtain.
I love that. Natasha, I don't know if I didn't ask you this yesterday, but is there anything that you guys do in your own bar?
Oh, I love everything that Mattias just said, and it is such an important practice. I did the same. I actually, when I was working in DC, I refused to take a management role because I wanted to feel what it felt like to be that 8 to 9 to 10 hour shift behind that bar, and at 2 a.m, how does it feel after you were destroyed? And how did I like or dislike my management, what they did at that point, and what the smallest things that could have really made it all better. And I tried to use that I don't have a huge team. I have a tiny team here, but that's everything that Mattias just said. Even more than a pre-shift, we do more strongly a post-shift, because we'll get torn apart in an hour and a half. And I go to them and I'm like, is everyone okay? Are you all right? Who's hungry? Who needs something? Well, these are our team that keeps us alive. And if they're going home to do unhealthy habits, including maybe having shots and things, doing it in an environment here where it's like safe, comfortable, but in moderation, along with food, it just allows them to debrief, to chill, to say that everything was okay, even though they felt like maybe they missed something. It doesn't matter. You killed it. We're alive. I think that's the thing I say. Is everyone alive? Did we make it? So this is fully an applause to what Mattias is saying. And actually, I've seen a lot of brands and brand ambassadors try to do like post-shift meals for teams, and working with the bar to be like, hey, can I buy a post-shift meal for the team? I mean, wow, talk about like a brand coming in and just taking care of a team that's taking care of them.
I literally was thinking that when you were saying about it, I was like, ooh, this would be a good brand ambassador thing to do for the team.
Lucky Shoulder, I think, originally was the ones that in London, they had a team of people go in jumpsuits and clean the bars for everybody and feed them while they cleaned the bar instead. And I think it was just such a beautiful thing that I saw them do. And I was like, oh, wow, like that would have been so nice if I was back then.
I think that's awesome. That's a great way of supporting a team, because it's the one thing I talk to some of the, I have a team of brand ambassadors that I'm working with and educating, and we're talking about, I was like, a lot of people just need support. I was like, you think of ways that you can help support, you know, a team, whether it's helping them streamline their bar systems if they don't have that kind of staff behind, because a lot of people, as we know, left the industry. So if they don't have that talent, can you help them streamline how they're serving cocktails? Maybe they don't know how to batch them as well as you do. So teaching them how to batch, you know, so they can, you know, not need as many people on the behind the bar. And you're getting some love here. Thanks. Exactly. But let's also talk about, I also want to, what's an idea is, Mattias, is that you are, as a brand ambassador, obviously there's so much stress behind that job. Is there anything that you recommend, you know, or it's something you do yourself? I know we talked a little bit and you're like, I don't know. But is anything you think that you have some practices that just self-preserve yours well-being?
So I'll preface this by saying I might be a bit vulnerable in this moment right now when I describe this, because I think there is something to be said about the lack of realism that happens on social media and the internet. You know, we all talk about issues wearing masks out in public these days, but the truth is we've been wearing a mask on our face for a lot longer, and it's the mask of social media. It's not all sunshine and rainbows, right? I've precariously walked the line between burnout and regular life frequently throughout probably my entire career as a bartender, as well as my career as a brand ambassador. And there are certain things that only recently I've kind of discovered, you know, as I've gone through sort of a pretty traumatic, you know, last couple of months, as I think a lot of people have in the world. And then just some personal situations came up that kind of really kind of pushed me to my limit. But it was by pushing me to my limit that I kind of expanded my potential to actually be able to deal with these situations. And for me, I'm not going to lie, I felt the breaking happening very closely. And it was scary. It's really scary. But luckily, this industry, out of any industry that I could even possibly think of on the planet, has such a beautiful support network of people. Because what's the thing? If you're a bartender and you're traveling, you can go to any bar and be like, hey, what's up? I'll take a shot of Fernet or something. And sure enough, they're probably going to be like, family, welcome, come here, give me a hug. You know, and it is that beautiful nature of the bar industry that we are so connected. And so I always say, and I always try and make people aware that you should definitely be having the conversations with friends long before this happens, saying, hey, I just want to let you know, like, I consider you part of my support system. If ever I'm struggling, would it be okay if I kind of reached out and just asked you for maybe just to listen? Because just to have the security of having somebody like that, and I'm lucky enough that I have people that I've had these conversations with and that I have really needed to lean on over the last few months. And I'm privileged enough to work with one of them directly. My best friend, Eric Anderson, is the East Coast ambassador. And my former bartender friend who I worked with in the UK is literally like my brother. I mean, I married him and his now wife. It's like, it's amazing to be able to see how close we can get in this industry. But that closeness, even with the distance that separates us, love does not get dampened by that distance. And so having that support network, super important. Also, discovering new ways, right? I think we spoke about this yesterday. You can tell people every day, go to the gym, it's good for you. I know it's good for you, but like I'm finishing at 3, 4 in the morning and then I have to get up and do it all over again. I'm not going to go to the gym. But eventually, just by trying some certain different things and pushing those boundaries of where you feel comfortable, you might actually discover the things that help you. For me, I love writing. I knew I've always loved writing, but I started journaling and I can't even count how many journals I've gone through. They're all like right up here. That's like a whole list of journals.
I can see them.
And it's crazy to think that just that simple idea of writing something down actually ended up taking that thought and putting it out of my mind. and relieving some of the mental pressure and the stress that had been built up in my head. So for me, those just two small examples are things that have really gotten me through the most trying time of my life. And I highly encourage, if anybody out there needs any resources, please reach out to me personally. My Instagram's here on the screen, or if you've got my number, just give me a call, text me. I may be busy, but I have literally a list of resources, and it might just be something as simple as an Instagram page that is really inspirational or fun to look at. But those things nowadays can really help.
Thank you for sharing that, Matt. That was really. I know you've told me yesterday you went through a lot, and so it's really great to be able to share that live with us, because as you said, not many people always open up, and our lives always look so glamorous on Instagram. Yeah, if you see my life, it looks amazing. And
that's where it's so important having people like Natasha in this world who look after her staff. I mean, I'm lucky enough to work for William Grant, where there are people in the HR department who are continually trying to put out beautiful little trainings and mental well-being seminars and things like that. And, whether people take advantage of them or not is another question, but it is nice that there are people out there who are trying and who are doing a good thing. And that's why I admire Natasha so much, is because of how she looks after her family at the bar.
Well, didn't we discuss that, Elaine?
Yes.
You said, when somebody comes to your bar and one has a gin they want to sell or a brand ambassador, I said, for one, anyone who comes and has an enthusiasm about gin and is trying to sell me or something, they become a person in my life. Mattias became a person in my life. I said, whether they want to or not.
Who can resist you, Natasha? I met you and I fell in love with you the first time.
Person in my life, and it's so important. The last thing, brand ambassadors and reps often get abused a bit as well.
Mm-hmm.
Making sure the way they take care of you, taking care of them as well. They need as much, love and support as the bar teams do. So.
No, absolutely. They do, because it is, as you know, it's hard being out there and you get rejected a lot. And to be able to go to somebody and who's just be like, I'm going to listen to your story. I'm going to hear what you have to say. I might not take your product in, but I'm going to be nice is kind of, it can be real, after a day, and I talk to some of the ambassadors, they're like, 3 or 4 rejections in a row. It just can be brutal on your soul. Yeah. So to be able to go to somebody who's like at least going to listen and like hear what they have to say and maybe give them some pointers would probably be an amazing stress relief for many brand ambassadors. It's kind of like a hug. Saying thank you so much. Well, Natasha, we're going to go into your bar right now. Because we mentioned it before, you opened a gin bar in a city that worships beer and bourbon. That's St. Louis. So why did you decide to open up in St. Louis, and how did you transition all these bourbon and beer lovers into gin lovers?
I think it was the best push I could possibly get, because when someone tells me I can't do something, that's when I mean, all of us, when someone tells us you can't do that, I'm like, okay, what's the worst that can happen, right? I get a lot of extra gin. So I was living in DC at this point, and I really was getting a lot of pushback about that people don't drink gin. Again, this is 8, 9, 10 years ago, and I'm not saying people don't drink gin at all. But to be able to open a gin bar at that point, I'm not saying they didn't even exist before that. It was just having a hard time.
Mm-hmm.
I was living in DC, which maybe I could open one there, and a lot of pressure to open something on a coast rather than the Midwest. So I decided to take a plunge and move back to my hometown of St. Louis, where I had a restaurant that my parents had started in 1983. This was a 30-year-old Persian restaurant, okay? And I'm insane. I do crazy stuff. I decide to close down the street and bring camels in and throw a party. I've been known to do silly, insane things.
You could be a Hendrix gin ambassador.
why he and I
I've
get
seen some
along.
camels at their parties.
We will do things when people say that makes no sense. And so when I landed back in St. Louis, people still said, why don't you open a whiskey bar? Literally, the streets in Missouri are lined with whiskey bars. Plus, that's not my passion. Do I love whiskey? Yes. Do I love rye? Yes. But I wanted to share my passion for gin. And so I opened a gin bar, and still no one was drinking gin. So we're in a Persian restaurant, which really in the Iranian culture, it's banned to drink alcohol in the country, right? It's illegal. So we're coming here and we're opening a gin bar, and people are coming in here. They're like, okay, I'm going to have a whiskey. I want a old fashioned and a Manhattan. That's when my eyes get really excited and I say, okay. And I take my beautiful barrel-aged gins and I make this gorgeous Manhattan-like drink or old-fashioned-like drink. And I give it to them. And they're like, oh, this is really interesting. I really like this. And I'm like, that's gin. And so I had to, every single person who walked into my bar, no matter what they wanted to drink, I had to put myself on the line and be like, you like vodka? Okay, wonderful. And kind of baby step them into the category of gin by trying out something. Again, I said to them, if you don't like it, I'm bringing you your vodka martini. I'm bringing you what you originally asked for. So I had to baby step and earn their trust. And again, it's a beer barbecue in Bourbon Town that is now exploded into the food and drink culture that it is today. But it took about 2 years to even get people to come in to say, yeah, I'm here for gin. And so I was very lucky that I had a restaurant that people trusted already, so that they said, okay, I trust this people and I trust this food. What crazy thing is Natasha doing right now? Okay, I'll try it. And that's how it worked. And Mattias was there on the time where we took the risk. And what was happening was distillers from all over the country were flying in to teach seminars here. But maybe 30, 40 people would show up for that. But these are people who would stop what they're doing from Michigan, California, wherever. And I said, more people need to hear this story and understand why gin is so amazing. So I shut down the street by my restaurant. And I shut down the restaurant. And then I invited Hendrix. I invited some of my smallest distilleries as well. And I sent this golden ticket. And it was like, it's my birthday this week, and I want to host a Gin Week Gin Festival. If you can come, please come. We'd love to have you. And they all showed up. Literally, we just closed down the street. And Mattias saw this too. And we closed down the street and hosted a gin festival in Bumblebutt, St. Louis, Missouri. And that was the start of what we tried to do around the United States now.
Love it.
You have to take a risk. So.
Oh, you're getting emotional. You do. You do have to take a risk. You did something quite incredible. I mean, the bar's been open how long now? 7 years?
7, 8 years now. Mm-hmm.
7, 8 years. That's amazing. And you've probably transformed people, so many people who were just drinking bourbon, didn't know a lot about gin. And I know it's not an easy conversation. It is not, and people are very hesitant. I have seen people, it is nice when you open their eyes and they think they're drinking vodka and they're like, wait, and you're like, that's gin. And they're like, whoa. It's like this eye-opening moment for them. They're like, I had no idea that it could be so delicious. Because they're afraid.
There's not, every gin is not for everyone, but there is a gin for everyone.
I think that's true. I think that is true. And not every gin. I mean, there's lots of gins. I love drinking martinis, like gin martinis, and not every gin makes the best martini. Others make great gin and tonic. So I love hearing that story.
On the back of the Hendrix bottle, we actually put, it's not for everyone. It's literally on there. If you look, it's good.
I love that. And it's true. It's like but then you find you have people who love it. I've met many people who just like Hendrix is my only gin. Like they are so it is
too.
and that, yeah, exactly. And that's the way, you know, as you like to say, the unusual gin, and it's not for everybody, but the ones who love it, they sure do. All right. So I'd love to talk about your role, Matt, as a BA for Williams Grants, right? Your job is not focused on sales. But you know, you said something yesterday, which kind of opened my eyes, which I didn't realize, is that your responsibilities, part of your responsibilities to be the eyes and ears on the ground, right? So that you are responsible, kind of keeping a pulse of what's happening within the marketplace, and then bringing that information to the bar teams and the distributors. Can you just expand like how that works? Because I do think this is such an essential why brand ambassadors exist, such a huge part of why they should be so tapped into by brand teams and by distributors, because you are the pulse on the marketplace. So tell me how you do this and like why you think this is so vital.
You are so correct. And there's so many different definitions for the word brand ambassador, right? There's like people in Texas, I feel there's a lot of brand ambassadors, and they're literally sales reps that go to different bars and kind of do that. And I've seen that in a couple of other states as well. But you are correct in thinking that at William Grant, we don't actually have any sales goals. We are indirectly tied to sales. And the fun part about that is that, to your point, we get to, it's not necessarily just about keeping a pulse on the industry, because you can measure somebody's pulse fairly easily, right? You put your fingers on their wrist or the neck or something, and you feel the pulse. And I think in life, keeping a track of the pulse of the industry might be fairly simple. You go online, which new bars have opened, cool, all right, yeah, everybody's doing well, things are shutting down, people are struggling with staffing. But when you measure somebody's blood pressure, right, you've got to have your systolic and your diastolic, and you've got all these numbers, and those are what kind of really indicate somebody's health. And that's the real job of a brand ambassador, in my opinion, is to be able to go in and not only see what's going on, but to understand and to figure out ways in which that we can help elevate. And, you know, one thing I love about Natasha is that it's, you know, I love talking about Hendrix with Natasha, but I love talking about all gins with Natasha, because rising tides raise all ships, right? And so as we're discussing this category, we are helping raise the gin category as a whole. And you cannot raise one without raising another. And that's the beautiful part of this industry. You know, I always used to say, as a bartender, when I was trying to be a brand ambassador, I said, a bartender is just a brand ambassador for every spirit behind the bar. And I think that's kind of true, right? You, like Natasha, when you were interviewing for your role in DC, you had to go and talk about 40 different gins that the guy had. And it's really interesting.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, thank you, Mark. Indeed. And it's really cool to see that, especially to Mark's point here about having the family has been such an integral part. Charlie Gordon, grandson of William Grant himself, was literally one of the key fundamental pushers for everything in the brand ambassador program. And now we have people like Charlotte Voisey leading the charge globally, and Sebastian Derbermay here in the US, really just championing this role of advocacy and understanding the industry. And so when you go to different markets and you see these issues, how can you do that? For me, it's about being able to collate the information that I've received over my travels and to understand, okay, this one person one time told me something really cool. I think this could help in this situation here. Maybe I could suggest that. By doing seminars like this, we're spreading the joy about doing post shifts, potentially some other aspects of mental health. Somebody might get one little nugget of inspiration from something I say one time. And that, for me, is success as a brand ambassador. And, you know, when I see bartenders that I've engaged with and I see a passion, I see that spark, and I take them and I say, okay, if you need any advice, reach out. And now I see them working in some of the best bars in the world or in the country. That is really fascinating and beautiful for me, because that means that I think I've done my job. At the end of the day, if we look after our people, to Natasha's point, that is what counts, right? We're putting the good energy out there, and then that good energy will then just keep circulating around. So I think that's probably the most important point for us as we go around.
No, I love that. And I love the fact that, you know, you mentioned to me yesterday, you know, your goal is to build advocates of the team by looking after them, as you're saying. So you go in, you're meeting with bar teams and you're supporting them. So in turn, no matter where they go in the world, they just know, you know, William Grant supports them, Hendrix supports them. So it becomes they're going to take the brand wherever they go. So it's not always like, it's indirect sales, as you said, because they just feel this love with the brand, and you build an advocate through just looking after them and introducing them to cool experiences.
And you
and
said
it's
something interesting a second ago. You said, people have Hendrick's as their choice of gin, right? Hendrick's is almost one of the unique spirit brands that has nearly transcended the spirits world, and it's become sort of a lifestyle in a way. You know, it's like, oh, I can't count the amount of times that I've heard behind the bar, oh, I don't like gin, but I love Hendrick's. And that like, it's just an interesting phrase that I find fascinating from consumers. You know?
I think that's great, and that's when you've really have crossed over and you've gone into new territory, and it's the best territory to be in. And it's also the people. Some companies, they struggle with what you're talking about because you can't measure it. It's hard to measure it, right? It is indirectly. There's no, like, you can't be like, oh, this bar because we did this, like. It's more of a love feeling. It's just more over time. Like, you see the brand growing, and it's through these efforts, and it takes time. And that's what a brand ambassadors are for. It's like, build over time this love and advocacy for the brand. And some people struggle with, like, well, I can't see the direct correlation, and they start to, like, doubt their program. And I'm like, no, it's if you build it over time, they will come. Like, if you build it, they will come. And that's why brand ambassadors are different than sales reps, because they build a particular brand and they build that advocacy for it, where sales reps have multiple brands and they do build some love, but it's very different. So I think you said it very beautifully. Okay, so go ahead.
One more tiny thing, just to go back to a little bit of what Mark said there about how it's the trust of the family that was so important and so great. And I think the fact that there's a great synergy between our sales teams and the brand ambassadors is another beautiful point. And I think, one thing I love about synergy is that every time I go to Ginworld, I see synergy of our category coming together. And that, for me, is the most beautiful thing ever. So there's just such a beautiful point that whoever's trying to be a brand ambassador out there, it's all about working cohesively with all of the different teams. We have to wear so many different hats and outfits in our industry, in our role, but by working together closely with everybody and cohesively, that's where the magic of being a BA can come in.
I absolutely agree. Yeah, because you cannot be out there just on your own doing your own thing. You have to communicate. You have to talk to the teams. As you said, give them information on what's happening in their marketplace, because you are living it every single day. And there are so many different people you have to communicate with, from the brand teams to the distributor to the sales reps to the accounts. I mean, you are the keeper of so many people's, secrets and stories, and you need to support them. And that's why that role can be very overwhelming for a lot of people. And knowing how to do that well is definitely a skill set. And let's talk about that, having everybody rise, bringing, what was the expression about rising, all ships rise? Because rising tides, it's my computer is about to die because I forgot to plug it in. Is Natasha, you and I were talking yesterday about, some of the things that I asked you. I said, you ever see people coming into the bar, and they're pitching their brand, and sometimes they just don't do it well. And I want to make sure I say this correctly. And a lot of times, larger companies kind of just focus on their own brands and not about the entire category as a whole. So let's talk about how brands, especially large ones, can do better to elevate the category of gin, because, as you know, it's still a growing category. And, maybe some of the things you've seen that you observed that you didn't like, that kind of were detrimental to the category as a whole.
Well, this is, I guess, sensitive here, right? So we're going to talk very generally about this, but I think all of the brands have I think gin, I can only talk about the category of gin. I can't talk about what's happening in whiskey or rum and all of these things, but I've been so proud of the category of gin and how well brands have been able to come together, to work together, whether it's brand representatives or however, but it seems like we're willing to work together, as Mattias says, to lift all of it up, lift the entire category of gin up. Now, it has been in the past, we have experienced sometimes where sometimes brands are bigger, have more money, etc., and have the ability to push a smaller brand out of a venue event or out of a placement, etc. And that has been seen as something that it doesn't work to benefit anybody. It doesn't help. It, like, let's say a big brand yes, they can push out a smaller brand that doesn't have as much money behind it by, I'm not going to say how, but I feel like at least what has continued to change is behind bars, even dive bars, not just cocktail bars, the need, and it's kind of a trend that's happening now. 1 to 2 gins is no longer enough to be behind the bar, not because I need multiple gins, but because gin is such a wide flavor profile that, like, you can't do the same thing with the same gins. You need kind of a range. And in order to have any kind of program where you're using gin, I think now the minimum is like 5 gins. And it's not to just have this amount of gins. They completely, like, beautiful floral profile or beautiful savory notes in it, or maybe you need a multi-genaver, and you might need things to be able to properly run a bar. And so I think it's really been exciting to see that the need for a range from small craft or local spirits to also so important to need the big brands there. There's times that guests have come into my bar, and it's an obstacle that I continue to have is guests will come into my bar and say, oh, I know Bombay, Hendrix, Beefeater, etc. Especially, I have hundreds of gins behind my bar. And they'll say, I know these. Give me something else. Like, give me something interesting. And anytime I hear something like that, I have to stop. And I have to say, I just want you to know that Bombay, Hendrix, Beefeater, these are exceptional gins who have paved the way to what the category of gin can do this day. It's because of what they've paved. Now, it doesn't mean because I know them, they're no longer exciting, So it's just really fun. And it's harder for a gin bar like me to be like, no, you need to try this cocktail with this gin that you already know. They'll be like, I want to switch it out with something else. I'm like, I built a cocktail because this is what goes well in it, but also giving the guest what they want. So going back to it, big brands, little brands, there's no need to push and fight and get out of the market because it's so important for all of us to be there to uplift the category of gin.
No, I agree with you. And I definitely know the pressure as somebody who's worked for some of the largest big brands my entire career, Diageo and Anheuser-Busch. I can see how and I also see the pressure that can be put on sales reps to come in and they're like, well, I'll take this in, but you need to give me an exclusive, or if you take this in, then you also, if I'm going to spend this money, then you're going to have to bring in X, Y, and Z brands as well. And you're like, I don't want X, Y, and Z brands. Yeah. I want this one. So it can kind of turn you off from wanting to deal with them because you're like, this is way too much pressure. And I have a program that I'm developing here, and your money's, your support is nice, but I'd rather you be a team player than not. And we can build something together. I think that's the best relationship. I'm sure, Mattias, you've had many conversations like that,
absolutely. And it's funny, like, I mean, I when I was behind the bar, I had a couple of reps who would come in and they would be like, well, okay, we need you to switch this out for this. And I would get, they knew by the end that they were like, if we say that to him, he's going to drop everything. And I actually had one person come in and I said, until you read my training packet that I put my bartenders through, I will not speak to you so come back when you've read it. Because he only was speaking about his brands. And I was like, I will not have you come in and try and sell me stuff that I do not believe in taste-wise. So it's like, so you go learn this. And fair enough, props to him. He went away and he learned it and he came back and actually was like really engaging in conversation with me. So it's interesting to Natasha's point about when you have to really respect the art and the craft of what people are doing behind the bar. That's first and foremost. I would 100 times out of 100 times prefer that somebody make a drink specifically with Hendrick's than sub out Hendrick's into another gin cocktail. There are cocktails I love Hendrick's in, and there are cocktails I know that it doesn't play as well as others. So I really respect the craft that people do behind the bar. And the reason I personally love going to gin bars, especially Natasha's, is that I get to learn about all these other gins that I don't necessarily have the opportunity to go and visit. And it's in continual education. Any brand ambassador out there should always aim to be, first and foremost, they obviously have to know everything about their own brand, but they also should know everything that they can about the category that they represent.
Absolutely.
Followed very closely by all of the other spirits categories too. Just because we become brand ambassadors and lose our title as a bar manager or beverage director or something like that does not mean that the education associated with that role should ever leave. That role was a platform from which we could grow into our current role as a brand ambassador. And if you start losing all the other stuff, you lose the foundation from which you stand on. And if you don't stand on anything, you're going to fall. So it's always a continual education. And that's why seminars that get put on by other brand ambassadors, I love attending because I always want to know what's going on, especially anybody related to champagne. So.
Me too. I'm like, yep, count me in, especially champagne. And let's go ahead.
Sorry.
No, I was going to say, well, that kind of leads me to my next question, which is, obviously there's so much competition in the marketplace, in the world of gin. Every craft distiller is making a gin. They have one out there. And so it can be, harder for brand ambassadors and sales reps to present them to a bar and convince them, okay, besides, you have these 5 gins, I have this other gin. I don't know. This is a question for both of you. What are some of the things that, Natasha, you like to see when somebody comes in and presents their brand that helps you kind of think? I know your bar is a little bit unique, but for you, how do you like somebody to see somebody presents that kind of might lean you, like tip you over?
And I'm sure Mattias has something to say about this.
Oh, I'm sure. Mattias, I definitely want to hear his techniques. So
it doesn't matter what you're doing. It doesn't matter if you're peddling like encyclopedias door to door like we used to do. It's about having full understanding of what your product is. If you're selling a portfolio of your local distillery, right? And the whiskey is the big seller, right? You probably know a lot about that. And then you're like, oh, I'm gonna go to the gin bar because I have a gin too. Oh, hey, here's a gin I have. But like, do you know your product? Do you know the botanical profiles? And forget even the botanicals that your distiller told you was in there, right? What does it taste like? What does it do? Like, what does it play well in? Like not just, it goes well in a gin tonic. Okay, like that is wonderful. But like, if you could like really come to understand and love your product, if you do, and you come to any bar and you exude that passion about whatever it is that you're selling, I want to talk to you. Be like, I have this portfolio, but like this whiskey, this gin, does this something spectacular? Like, I'm going to listen to you. If I'm not an asshole, I'm going to listen to you. And also obviously being aware of not coming at busy times, etc. But really if you come to my bar and don't know what's in your gin properly, you can't talk to me about it. For one, I can't blame the gin. I can blame you. I'm going to investigate the gin and I'm going to figure out if it's outstanding or not on my own. And I'm going to play with it. But if you can't start me into there, I might miss something that is there. I've had gins that have come to my bar with less than motivated people. I took the gin in. A year later, I revisited the gin because I have hundreds. I can't always brain think about everything. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, this is fantastic because of this, and this. I sat on it for a year because no one could like be there to be like, this is why it's amazing. I finally got to it. But that's the thing, kind of just, if you're doing anything, try to be passionate behind it.
I love that. No, absolutely. You really do kind of, because if you're not loving your own product, why is anybody else going to love it? Why else? Mattias, what do you think?
I think, I mean, great point. And I think the key word there was real that you said, right? Like you said, when they really love it and they can really have conversations. And I'd go just even that little inch differently and say, to have real conversations. I can't tell you the amount of times that I've spoken to people and I'm watching them and I'm like, wow, the wheel's turning, but the hamster's dead. And I'm like, you literally you're regurgitating information you read on a slideshow somewhere down the line. And I'm like, cool. And I'm like, but what about this? And one of my favorite people in the industry, and I'll mention a whiskey brand here, is I love working with Neil Strachan from the Balvenie because I see this in him. He loves whiskey as a category. And when I work with him, I'm in awe of how just incredibly impassioned he is about everything. And I've seen him like beautifully educate, I will say, people who try and do exactly that and speak from an ungenuine place. And it really is so important to be able to just love what you do, right? The oldest and probably the first thing that anybody will tell you if in a brand ambassador, and I'm sure maybe in the school that you have and the education sessions will be, pick a brand that you love, right? That's probably the number one thing about being a brand ambassador. And it is very important for that exact reason. But don't lose that love because it can very easily be subdued by decks and all these presentations and jargon and things like that come in there, and you think you have to say something. But the truth is, if you can find your own unique voice about it, that's where the magic comes in. And so whenever I've been in to talk about Hendrick's, as Natasha said, there is these big brands out there. But the truth is, Leslie Gracie, our master distiller, was the one who broke sort of the glass ceiling of the gin category, if you will. And it went from London Dry to sort of being able to branch out into this new distilled category of gin, which is incredible. And it's from those steps. We're having those steps every single day in our industry. And there's amazing gins coming out there with beautiful flavor profiles. And so when I walk in, it's my job to showcase the beautiful history of Hendrick's, where it comes from, the continual innovations that we're doing through our cabinet of curiosities, which again are Leslie's opportunity to continually push the gin category forward in new ways. You released Orbium, that was with quinine, wormwood, and lotus blossom in it. That was like a crazy step in a direction that people were like, oh my God, what are you doing? That's nuts. So it was really cool to be able to see her continually pushing that. And it's my job to be the voice of her, share my experiences of having tea with her and walking on the beach, and all sorts of incredible things that I get to go do when I go to Scotland and see her.
I love it. Also, I will say for any brand ambassadors watching, that is good brand ambassadorship. He managed to drop in some key facts about his brand in a very casual way. So,
well, for more information, you can go to hendricksgin.com.
It was so well done. It was like so smooth, and this is the brand ambassador show. I want people to talk about their brands, but that literally was, and I'm not making fun of you. It was perfect. It was like, well done. Dropped in those nuggets. All right, so we're kind of getting at the end, but there's definitely a question, Mattias. You were talking about yesterday that you have to travel to multiple cities, right? So you found it very hard to stay organized. So you mentioned a resource, and this was mentioned a while back by Xavier Harit, who introduced me to Google Maps. But for people who might not have seen that show, I would love for you to explain how that works, because I think it's brilliant.
It's all about, again, efficiency, right? As bartenders, we want to work efficiently. Bar managers, you want to run efficiently. Owners, you want to operate efficiently, and brand ambassadors, well, we want to travel efficiently. So when you get down to it, I highly just recommend it. There's a lot of information that can come at you very quickly as a brand ambassador, and the faster in your tenure that you can find ways to organize that information, I think the more success you may have. Maybe you have a brain that just stores everything automatically, and that's good for you. I'm not one of those people. I have lists
Me neither.
of everything. So, like, if you look at my list of LA here, I'm going to see if this works. I don't know if it'll go. We'll
Hold
see.
it closer to you. I think it's a little
sometimes
blurry.
it does, sometimes it doesn't. But
Gotcha.
if not, we will see if one day I can share this. But
yeah, exactly. It's too blurry.
Too blurry. Oh, it's coming. There you go.
There you go.
Can kind of see, maybe it's coming somewhere, that I have all of these different points on my LA map. Let me see if it goes over here. There you go.
There you
so
go.
I have all these different places in LA that I visit.
All the
If
time.
you visit, you zoom out. And again, I wish you could see this, but like the US as a whole is just covered in these little pointers.
So you can create your own personal map, correct?
You can create your own personal little maps, and it's very easy. So when you're on a place, you click on it, there's a little save button. You can go click save, and then you can add it to a different list. However you'd like to do that list. If you're a local brand ambassador, you could have it by neighborhood. If you are a national brand ambassador, you can have it by city, like I do. And that is just a very handy way that I've found, not only to organize information for myself, because you can even save notes associated with that place. So, you know, whether it's people's names, who runs it, if they have the product or whatever you want to do, it's great. And then the only thing I would say is just be conscious of the notes you take in there, because if you do share that with anybody ever, then they will also be able to see the notes.
If you have a very specific description for somebody and it might not be that flattering, you might not want to write that.
But it's just a very handy way of doing that. I used to do it just in note form, but I kind of found that this was the way that I best can approach it. So I'm really excited about that, and it's just one of the many ways that I've found to maximize the efficiency with which I can do my job.
No, I love that. When I discovered that, I was like, that is something I'm going to steal. And I've shared that with many other brand ambassadors. They're like, whoa, I never even knew that I could do that, which I think is incredible. I love, and also besides that one, which I started using, so to keep myself organized on a day-to-day, because we all write things down, right? So there's an app called Todoist. So Todoist, and it's great because you can put all, you know, instead of like writing it here and writing it here, I just keep it there, and then you can literally go through and schedule it by day. So I go through my giant list of like 75 to-dos, and then because I like to be efficient, and I know there's only so many things you could do in a day, so I then schedule, like based on my schedule, I can then just move the things I want to work on that particular day into my list. So my list doesn't look daunting. It's like, I can only get these 3 things done today. They're my most important things and the most urgent. So they're on my to-do-ist. But in that way, it's just a running track, and you could just delete them, and it feels so good when you clicked done. And then it sends you a nice little report. You've done this many things, you know, every week I get like a report. It makes you feel very productive.
That's great.
It's definitely a great one. All right. So I'm going to make sure I'm just giving myself a quick look to make sure we covered everything. We talked about elevating the thing of gin, beer. I think we're getting down to the end. Now we're going to share some career advice. And you already shared one about loving the brand you work for and having passion. But so the question I like to end up on always, if you could give career advice to those looking to become a brand ambassador or currently working as one, outside of you must love the brand you work for, what would it be? Like, if you know, what is the advice you would give them that you wish somebody else might have given you, or something you just, a nugget of wisdom you learned along the way? Natasha?
Yes. I think my nugget would be, never let anyone say you can't. And I think I've known every brand ambassador who's gotten exactly what they've wanted has never allowed an obstacle to get in their way. And there is no job for category global gin ambassador. It doesn't exist, right?
You could be that person.
Well, I mean,
Ian Burrell is the self-appointed rum ambassador, so why can't you be the?
We are. So you cannot, like, I knew that I could not work for any particular brand. So it doesn't matter what you're doing. Go for it. Do it. And if somebody, just keep everyone out of your ears. Like, they don't need social media, as Mattias was communicating. is not always portraying what is actually going on. So just close your ears, put your little blinders on, and stay focused on what it is that you want. If you're actually passionate about it, you can't do things because of money. You can't do things. It might work. You might be successful in that. But in this way, every brand is looking for someone who is passionate about doing something rather than someone running to get a position because of money. It just doesn't work like that. And knowing Mattias told me his story and how he got there, I was like, I don't know how anyone couldn't understand that you were perfect for this job. And it did. It showed based on what he did. And so like when I look sometimes in my past years, look like a little girl going to Diageo, William and Grant and being like, I'm doing this crazy thing and I'm going to host Ginworld gin festivals around the United States. And they're looking at me like, what's this little girl trying to do? And I'm like, whether you get on board or not, I'm going to keep doing this until they finally listen. So it's been really fun to be able to, it's very hard. There's days where you just want to get under your bed and cry. But if you are actually passionate about where you want to get to, you just got to keep jumping over those obstacles and just stop looking at what everyone else is doing because it's not your life.
Absolutely. I think that's great words of advice because if you listen to other people, so many people doubt you and they'll tell you things that that's crazy. You shouldn't do that. But you do need to, because you will spend a lot of time working on the thing that you're trying to create. And if you don't love it, it's very hard to dedicate that time, away from your family, away from your friends. I think about how many hours a week I work on the Brand Ambassador Academy and doing things like this. And it's like, it's got to be something that you really love. And I do, everything about it. I get to have these amazing conversations with people like yourselves and create education that helps other people. And that brings me, I hate to use the joy. It just brings me joy and happiness and it drives everything I do. So, and Mattias, for you, what's your nugget of wisdom?
I'm going to approach this in 3 parts, if possible, and very quick way. The first one related fully to the brand ambassador role. Second, as a person within the industry, and the third, a personal. The first one, I would say, as a brand ambassador, is you have to find yourself in the brand. And it's something that I've noticed over the years, and I've seen people change when they're representing something, because the thing that they're representing becomes themselves. And it can almost overpower their own identity, is to have that brand that they represent become their whole thing. And then at some point, if they decide to leave, whatever, they get into this identity crisis, and it can be a bit of a nightmare. But again, going back to the discussion we had before about that realism that needs to happen in our roles, there can be such realism when you find the bits of yourself and your soul, your passions, your interests that overlay with the brand's identity. And when you combine those two things together, the growth that can happen is like water and seeds and soil on a beautiful hot summer's day. It's incredible. One of the people I admire most in that regard is David Allardyce from Glenfiddich. He is a fantastic DJ. And I've loved watching him combine his love for music and his love for whiskey over the years. And it's just been an inspiration for me. And so he's somebody who told me that. And I've taken that truly to heart. As I've gone through with kind of, my love for digital creation and, social media in terms of its creativity and taking pictures and photography, videography, things like that. So I would just say, you've got to find the aspects of your own soul in the identity of the brand that you're representing. Absolutely. To truly kind of soar there. Secondly, would just be, again, I love Natasha's point about closing your ears to the world about criticisms and things like that. That's beautiful and 100% true. There is another element when you're talking to people, as we do as brand ambassadors, that we actually need to open our ears and listen and actively listen to people. So often I've seen people who don't listen. They only they'll hear, but they won't listen. And they'll sit there and they'll have a conversation with somebody and they'll leave. And I'll be like, dude, are you okay? And they're like, yeah, I'm all right. And I'm like, the person didn't even hear that they were struggling in their life. And it's your job to be there as a support system in a way, right? Like, you shouldn't be the sole support system, but you're there to offer a resource or you can definitely guide them in potentially a right direction. And if you don't know which direction, you can probably find somebody who does know which direction to do that. So you really just have to actively listen and see how people are doing, and what they actually need, because it's what people need that's really important, right? I have my agenda, sure, when it comes to what I would like to see on a cocktail menu, but it's what the program is, to your point, Natasha, right? Like, you have a very specific program you're trying to run. That menu you designed is for, and that's the identity of that menu. I can't come in and throw one cocktail on there that I want to see. You have to listen and understand what that person wants. Very important. And the last one is be kind. Be kind, because you don't know what struggles people are going through. Okay, that is the most important little thing in life, I think. And I've learned the hard way sometimes, coming from a place where kindness it's not the first thing that springs to mind. But at the end of the day, if you can really just make sure that you come from a place of love, live from, as I like to call it, your heart space, that for me is when life is worth living. That's for me when life is on the right track, and I see joy and I see the magic in every moment of every day, when my heart is open and it's connected with my head, and kindness is the driving force and the direction on the compass. So that would be my last point.
I love all of that. It's all very, very true, and great words of wisdom, especially about being kind. I think within this industry, I think a lot of us can learn that lesson, to not be so judgmental, and to be kind, and to listen to each other. As you're right, the one thing I've seen as I've gotten older in life is now noticing, because I try to spend more time now getting to know other people and asking a lot of questions. I now notice I'll be out in conversations with people and notice they won't ask me one question about myself the entire time I'm talking to them. I'm like, wow, I haven't seen you in 5 years, and you just talked about yourself for the entire time. And not once did you ask me how I was, what I was up to. And I'm like, and it just kind of, it has changed the people I spend my time with now. I just like people I used to really worship. And I'm like, no, you really don't care about me at all, do you? Like, it's just about you. And I care about you. Like, I want to know. So it's just interesting, as you get older, you start to be wiser. And I realized when I was younger, I talked a lot about, I was that person talking all about myself. And now I really enjoy talking to other people and getting to know their stories, because I think it's just so much. I think it makes us all better people, because then we have that understanding.
And I think I'm so thankful and grateful, because I've gotten to know you two a little better today. I didn't know that about you, Natasha, with the DC stuff. So that's really cool. And it was definitely a ginteresting experience.
It is definitely a ginteresting experience. Well, I just want to say thank you for everybody that is listening. Thank you so much to the both of you for participating. If anybody missed any of this conversation, it stays on Facebook for the next 2 weeks. Also, if you want to see any past conversation, there's actually a YouTube channel called Celebrating the Brand Ambassador, which has all 43 episodes loaded on there, so you can see all the different guests that we've had. And if you want to know anything about the Brand Ambassador Academy, we'll just go to the website, brandambassadoracademy.com. But thank you guys. I think this was such a great conversation, and I really enjoy getting to know you both a little bit better, because I've known Natasha now for 4 years or 5 or longer than that, and I didn't know any of that. And Mattias, am I saying your name correctly? That was right.
Yes.
Yes. I know. Yeah. I look forward to having a drink in person and hearing more about you're a very deep and kind soul, and I'm very happy to have you in my life now.
Elaine, thank you for having us. This is wonderful to be together and share.
Cool. Well, guys,
thank you.
You're very welcome, and have a great rest of your Wednesday. And thanks again. Bye, everybody, and thank you for listening.
Bye.
Thank you, Paula. Bye.